Awesome. I think that's a good transition to kicking off tonight our Women in Enterprise Sales Forum. Thank you all so much for joining us. By way of introduction, my name is Jessica Lynn. I'm a co-founder and a partner here at Workbench, an enterprise VC fund here in New York, along with my colleagues Kira and Priyanka. And we invest in enterprise software startups throughout the country in $3 to $6 million rounds. And we love talking all things enterprise sales and go-to-market. So please always send great enterprise companies our way. So here at Workbench, we have been extremely passionate about supporting women in enterprise, or women enterprise, as I like to call it, for the past 7 years. You'll see a big part of that really actually stems from our own personal experiences, which was starting this new fund, looking around and realizing that there just weren't that many women in enterprise software. So what we've been doing here at Workbench is galvanizing this incredible community of women in enterprise here in New York, across founders, operators, execs, VCs, and more, across our lunches, breakfasts, workshops, meetups. And it really hit peak in 2018 when we hosted our first ever Women in Enterprise Summit called Navigate. We're in, along with Salesforce Ventures. We had, as you can see here, over 250 women in the room. We had some phenomenal women leaders and speakers from Slack, Bank of America, New Relic, Assistant Mayor of New York City, and more. And it was so awesome. And we are looking forward to bringing that back later this year. So stay tuned. But in the meantime, we launched this Women in Enterprise Sales Forum really because we realized how many badass women in enterprise sales were within our very own Workbench portfolio companies and our greater community. So that's really our goal for tonight, twofold. One is to hear from 3 incredible women in technical sales for an honest and tactical conversation on how to sell a technical enterprise product. I mean, incredible companies across Snyk, Datadog, and FireHydrant here. And then we've left quite a bit of time at the end for smaller breakout groups for you all to be able to connect with other great women in sales too. So with that, I'd love to turn it over to Kira Colburn, who will be moderating today.
Great, thanks so much, Jess. Hi everyone, I'm Kira Colburn. I'm head of content at Workbench. I've been here for about a year now, which is just insane to think how kind of incredibly fast and yet incredibly slow time has been moving this past year. But at Workbench, I really help build and grow our amazing enterprise community, which, as Jess mentioned, really includes this Women in Enterprise Sales Forum now. So for those of you who haven't been to a Workbench event before, first of all, welcome. We hope to see you at many more. And second of all, like Jess said, we try to keep these super fun and tactical and conversational. So, I mean, if you're on the East Coast and it's New York 5 o'clock time, feel free to grab a drink and make this as fun as possible. Also, if you're on the New York coast, it's kind of gross and rainy outside, so we're going to try to brighten your day with this. We have 3 amazing women with us here today to talk to us about the very complex world of technical sales. I feel like each of those 3 words in itself is pretty difficult, enterprise, technical sales, they're each a doozy, but we're going to tackle all 3 today. So we really want to get to know the ins and outs of selling a technical product versus any other product. So we're definitely going to have a lot of time for questions, so throw them in the chat whenever you have one and we'll get to it. But I think with that, we can get started. And in Workbench fashion, what we always do is we kick off with an icebreaker and an introduction. So our icebreaker today is, if you weren't doing technical sales, what would you be doing? And then just for an intro, introduce yourself, your company, and your role. So I think, Kelsey, why don't we start with you?
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kelsey Kraft. I'm an enterprise account executive at Datadog. I've been with the company for almost 2 years now. Been really exciting, a great growth story, and scary to think we're kind of just getting started. So more to come there. I guess for the icebreaker, what would I be selling, right? If I wasn't selling Datadog, right, Kira?
Selling, or what would you be doing if you weren't in technical sales?
Awesome. So I'm a big fan of Lululemon. actually probably more so now with COVID. So I think it would be super cool to be involved with kind of, their go-to-market and selling for them, especially if they got into new ventures like supporting like college sports teams or professional sports teams, et cetera. So I think Lulu for me, for sure.
Very cool. Yeah, Lululemon definitely sucks up a lot of my money for the month normally. So I'm with you on that. Brianna.
Yep. Hi, I'm Brianna Kelly. I am a sales director at Snyk, which basically just means that I'm an individual contributor at the enterprise level. So tricky title, but I've been with Snyk for just about a little over 2 years now. And similar to Kelsey, it's been kind of a crazy ride. I joined when we had just raised our Series B and we're Series E now. So it's been a fun 2 years. And if I weren't doing this, if it's kind of like a dream world, I would love to be a travel agent. I'm a big time planner. I think it would be fun to get to go visit the places that I would recommend. And yeah, I think it's really, really fun planning like itineraries and stuff. So yeah.
Definitely plan my post-COVID traveling because there will be a lot of it for sure. And Sheila.
Hey everyone, my name is Sheila Mcadam. I am one of the account executives with FireHydrant. I look after our accounts here on the East Coast as well as in EMEA. I have been with FireHydrant for 5 months now, so since November. We are a Series A company, so a lot earlier in our infancy than Datadog and Snyk are. And if I was not at FireHydrant, similar to what Brianna said, I love to travel. Maybe not a travel agent. I'd love to be like a travel blogger and be able to kind of travel around the world for free and try different cultures and meet different people. So definitely on the travel side, but probably a travel blogger.
Cool. And with that, so really where we want to start is breaking into technical sales. I think this is probably something some of the people on the call today, they might not be in technical sales yet, but they really want to learn, how can I get into technical sales? What's really needed for me to do this? So maybe if each of you could just go through, your journey into technical sales. Have you always been in sales? Have you always been in technical sales? Really, what did that look like? So I think, Sheila, we can start with you.
Sure. So my career started in sales. My education and background is in engineering. And my first role out of college was with a company called Rockwell Automation. And it was a sales engineering role. So they actually put us through like a 9-month program to really learn how to sell. They wanted us to have like an engineering background. I was there for a few years and decided I wanted to pivot out of like product sales and into technology. So I started with a software company called 1E. I essentially was in a commercial sales role. They kind of just threw me in there. It was an incredible experience. I had the whole of the country. I really had to learn kind of how to prioritize where I'm spending my time and what accounts I want to go after. From there, I moved into a consulting sales role. I wanted to move into a more modern technology than what 1E was doing at the time. Moved into a consulting company that helped enterprises move to the public cloud, AWS, GCP, and Azure. Learned a lot about modern technologies, why companies need them, what they're doing with it, how it affects their business. But then I decided to move to a company called App Dynamics to really learn enterprise sales and how to sell software at the enterprise level, which is quite different than selling consulting and what I was selling at 1E and at Rockwell. I learned a ton while at AppD. I really learned how to solve for pain and building relationships and building champions, which I think we're going to get into later on today. And then decided I want to really, really challenge myself. So I came over to FireHydrant, which is a Series A company, which is so different than a publicly traded company. AppD is part of Cisco. And it's been an amazing learning experience the past 5 months. So super excited to be on the FireHydrant team. I know I'm going to learn a lot. I know I'm going to fail a lot, and I could not be more excited to be here.
Yeah, and Brianna, how about you? Because I think this is your first technical sales role, correct?
Yeah, correct. So speaking of fire hydrants, I describe that as like how I felt my first week 2 weeks, month, 3 months at Snyk. I had never sold a technical product before. I sold like marketing tech, but it's just so different from like a true technical sale. And when I got to Snyk, I didn't understand anything basically about how the product worked. I knew that I wanted to get into security products. I just kind of felt like that's such a growing market. And I also was really interested in technical sales, just having something a little meatier and like candidly harder to sell. So I thought that it would be an interesting challenge. It certainly was, but yeah, it was a real uphill battle for sure when it came to understanding like, okay, not only do I have to learn the value prop of this company, but I also need to really like sink my teeth into what we do here and try and find a way to fully understand it. So yeah, I felt like my head was like encased in cement for probably 2 months while I tried to figure this out. But for me, it just came down to like tons of continuous education, making sure I was connecting with my SE all the time, my technical counterpart, asking as many questions as I could, and then just like leaning on the sales skills that I'd grown in other roles. I don't think that those pieces are so different, but so leaning on what I knew and then just making sure that I could grow as much as possible, that technical knowledge as quickly as I could. And I tried to stay like a mile deep and an inch wide for a long time so that I could just move as quickly as I needed to. And then the knowledge sort of just came. So very different background, no engineering background at all, zero technical knowledge. But I think that now I know enough to make it seem like I have some technical background at least.
And Kelsey, how about you?
Yeah, so I got my start in technical sales with Oracle. Which I feel like everyone has worked at Oracle at some point in their career. But I actually have nothing but really positive things to say about my time there. Obviously a great training foundation. And really, I think what amazed me from the very beginning was how many businesses are, running their entire back end, on Oracle technology, and have been for, tens of just a long time, right? So started there, was in an inside role, had some really great mentors, and got into a field role, moved down to Southern California. I was working up at Oracle HQ, which was pretty cool. And then, from there, obviously, I think, Oracle's kind of a machine. So I wanted to certainly challenge myself, go to a smaller company, learn. I'm really into like learning from different leaders. I think everyone has something new to teach you and to add as a part of like your sales evolution. So went to New Relic after that, and really wanted to be in a space that there were these macro trends, right? People were moving to the cloud. There was a lot of complexity. There were dynamic environments, et cetera. And with that, end users and developers needed this observability, right? And was at New Relic for just about a year, and then moved over to Datadog. Have been here for almost 2 years now. But again, I think circling back, it's been a challenge, right? I think technology is somewhat of an illusion. If someone were to ask me in the beginning at Oracle, like, what is a database? I probably couldn't have described it very well. But it's been fun getting into, a sale at Datadog and somewhat New Relic within that observability space that you can like really tie it back to errors, revenue's not coming in, right? So turning that back to a business outcome has been really cool, and obviously more to come for sure.
Yeah, and kind of similar to you guys here at Workbench, we're pretty technical. I'm not in sales by any means, but I'm on the content side, and I don't come from a technical background, but just kind of ramping up on learning the technical stuff to even write about has been definitely a learning curve. But I don't know if necessarily coming from a deep technical or engineering background would have helped it. So I feel you on that for sure. And kind of to that point, and Jessica, in the chat, this kind of points to your question. Did you guys have any formal training programs when you first joined your technical roles, to learn about that product and really get ramped up? Because I think that's something, if you don't have those technical skills that you're definitely going to need. So I think, Brianna, why don't we start with you?
Yeah. When I joined Snyk, it was still pretty small. So there wasn't really that formal sales training process that I think it sounds like both Sheila and Kelsey had in those initial technical sales roles. With me, it was a lot more ad hoc, but there was a program. It was basically just sitting with anyone on the implementation, engineering, sales engineering side and just picking their brain for an hour, over and over the course of a couple of weeks. So I think that just the thing that helped the most for me in terms of like training programs was making sure that I'm asking as many questions as possible. I feel like it's hard initially, especially if you're coming from a non-technical background, you feel really silly and you're like, everyone understands this, everyone knows this, and I am going to drown. But the more questions you ask quickly and the quicker you know what you don't know, the easier it is to get up to speed.
Yeah. And I don't know if Sheila or Kelsey, you have anything to add to that.
The one thing I'll add to that, I'm at FireHydrant now, and we don't have a fully built out training program like I did in my previous company that had a full enablement team. So I did get product training here at FireHydrant and sitting with my SC and the product team to understand what we do. I think the biggest thing for folks in technical sales is understanding the so what. So if this feature exists, what does that mean for our customer? Like, what problem does it solve? So we don't necessarily need to get into like the bits and bytes of the product features and what it does. I mean, I guess we do have to know what it does, but really how it relates to the pain and challenges that our customers might have.
Yeah. And something actually, Jenny Jacobs from Product Board, this is something she mentioned in our last forum. So she said she didn't have, a super formal training program, but she kind of just created her own. She went out and just asked current colleagues and former colleagues, and she actually just reached out to people on LinkedIn cold who had relevant experience that she was looking for. She really just created her own training program. So that's also a really awesome way to go. Cool, but with that, I actually want to head into, now that we know how to break into technical sales, how you actually succeed in technical sales. So I feel like this is actually like the meat of what we can talk about today. So one thing I know, the three of us were talking about before is, so, the three of you with enterprise sales, super long sales cycles, often big contracts. But the three of you are actually doing this in kind of an interesting way. And at least on your websites, you have a self-service model where developers can just swipe their credit cards or go online and try the product, which is a little bit hypey nowadays. But with your sales motions, there's a lot more complexity behind that and a lot more behind the scenes. So could you guys just kind of walk through, the bottoms up versus top down strategies you're using? And I think, Kelsey, why don't we start with Datadog?
Yeah, so I think traditionally, kind of within Datadog's foundation, kind of starting in that niche, commercial mid-market space, obviously that bottoms up approach has worked really well, and it's still working very well. It's even working well in enterprise accounts that I'm supporting. But I think, kind of to your point, as an enterprise seller, you're carrying a large quota. Throwing down a credit card is maybe not the best path for success, right? To build bigger deals, right? That's kind of all of our goal. So I would say, the motion is certainly developer centric, right? We got to win hearts and minds at the HOK +1, level, and really have those folks be great champions, right? But I think as Datadog in particular has matured, it's becoming kind of a dual motion, right? As we're building those champions and as we're, taking on these proof of values and going after, large scope of our end users architecture, we want to have those checkpoints and kind of executive alignment touches with folks that are, EBs, et cetera. And in some cases as well, right? Trying to prospect higher within the organization and maybe having a leader within a large enterprise say like, hey, we need to improve, and this is something that's one of my big initiatives this year, like please work with my team as well. So I think that It's definitely on a case by case basis, but I would say, for all of us on this call, the developer is really at the heart of technology these days. So you can't really look any further than there as a starting point.
Yeah, and I think, Kelsey, something you had said earlier when we were just talking is that, people are often under the impression that, sales leaders are selling millions of dollars of contracts just kind of like on their casual day to day. But that isn't really the case. And do you want to like just speak to kind of course correcting expectations there and what that actually looks like?
Yeah. I wish I was selling $1 million deals from the get-go. I actually, in my time at Datadog, my most proud transaction that I've done is like a $700, through AWS Marketplace credit card transaction, and it's now leading into kind of a bigger endeavor. But I would say, this is hard work. I think, kind of the land and expand model is what most of these, enterprise technology companies are doing these days, getting in, however, right? Getting an MSA established, and then really you have a hunting license within the organization to go spread the good word. And one of the great things about that as well is that, if you have a group that's using your product, you can leverage things like internal references, right? From a sales perspective, obviously our customers rely on us to know enough, be dangerous enough. But I think what is truly powerful is when you get into an account and you're, getting into new business units, et cetera, and setting up kind of those internal reference discussions and having your customers sell on your behalf. So, kind of a lot to my answer there, but I would say, as long as you can get in somehow, some way, that's usually, a successful first step, and then you can go from there.
Yeah. Brianna, how about you with bottoms up versus top down and what Snyk's doing?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Kelsey said. I think that Snyk is at a slightly different stage than Datadog is. Obviously we're pre-IPO, we're still in a really big growth phase. So that top up function is still pretty important to us. I know that there are plenty of deals that we've gotten into because there have been a couple developers who wanted to give it a go and they tried out Snyk. We had our SDRs, or I myself reached out to them, and they might have started, same thing, I think land and expand as a smaller deal, but then grown into something really significant because of that internal developer advocacy. So I think on one side, the developer top or bottoms up definitely is helpful. And I think that on the other side, a lot of the selling that we're doing is kind of more traditional, like we're just trying to break into brand new accounts where no one's ever touched anything. So I think it's a pretty even split.
Yeah, and the thing with enterprise sales too is that it's not always the sexiest of products, like a Lululemon or something like that, where it definitely doesn't sell itself, but it definitely has a certain appeal that you can kind of piggyback off of. And this kind of points to Gretchen's question. So how do you guys think about storytelling and really selling value versus selling features? And I think, Sheila, you kind of touched on this before, but I'd love if you can kind of expand on that and, your approach and kind of breaking down the complexities behind technical sales on like a more sellable level.
Yeah, I love storytelling. I think it's such a powerful way to explain kind of what your product does. One of the methods that I like to use when I do storytelling, it's traditionally used in like objection handling, which is like the feel, felt, found approach. But being able to share how other customers have leveraged our product and used our product to solve a lot of the same challenges. A lot of the companies that we're trying to sell to, they're quite similar in terms of the problems and challenges that they're facing. And people buy based off of emotion and being able to relate and kind of striking those chords with the people that we're talking to. So I always try and say, I understand how you guys are feeling. We work with a lot of customers that, have the same sort of challenges, challenge X, Y, and Z. And these are some of the benefits that they've realized. So I love storytelling more so than going in there and saying, our product does X, Y, and Z, or look at this shiny little feature. being able to talk about the problems that we solve for and how it relates to them. I love storytelling. I do it all the time.
Yeah, how about Brianna or Kelsey? Do you have anything to add to that?
I would say, I mean, I certainly agree, right? I think it's all about how you're presenting yourself. I think that my favorite kind of intro description of Datadog when I'm talking to someone who maybe isn't as modern, maybe is a little bit legacy, et cetera, is, typically we engage with enterprises to help them with X, Y, and Z, and really painting that picture while also educating them, right? Like not everyone is on the same level of maturity when it comes to, observability in particular. So I think that our job in selling is also educating, and you can't assume that everyone, is as mature as the next customer.
Yeah, and the next thing I actually want to talk about is, how do you actually build authentic relationships with your customers, which is definitely a little bit different, I assume, now during COVID. So if you guys could just kind of talk about, how you do that, what does actually building that relationship mean, and, how you go about doing that from a tactical level. I guess, Brianna, we can start with you.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. The first thing that I always try to do really early on, and it can definitely be awkward if you're not used to it, I try and get someone's cell phone number, like basically the first time I speak to them, and then immediately start texting them like somewhat regularly. I think that it makes it seem, I mean, the people you text regularly are your parents, your friends, your spouse, whoever. So it kind of like makes me feel like I'm a regular part of their day a little bit, every couple of days, like, hey, how's everything going? I think that first of all, it makes it seem again, like I'm not just a voice in a square Zoom box. But then additionally, I think it helps later down the line when you're trying to push stuff to close. I also think just asking regular questions about like their life outside of the deal that you're running, and also their life inside the organization. Like, who do you work with? Who do you like? Who do you not like? Like, why are you doing this? So things that are going to help the deal, obviously, but then also just things to understand them as a person. I think that people buy from people, sharing things that I'm doing in my life on the weekends, which isn't very much right now. Or, just building like a normal friendship, like you would with anyone else, even if they know that it's for potentially other reasons, like they know you're trying to sell them something. I think that it just helps to make all the conversations you have a little bit warmer and easier.
Yeah. How about you, Sheila?
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the other things I like to do a lot as I'm starting to build relationships is making a lot of deposits to them. So reaching out to them to give them information without asking for anything in return. Last week, I think it was you guys, Workbench did a fireside chat with the CEO of Twilio, for example. And one of the prospects that I'm working with, their new CTO came from Twilio. So I just pinged him and I said, hey, Workbench is having this event. I know your new CTO came from Twilio. You might be interested in seeing this. And he actually reached out to me afterwards and said, thank you so much for sharing that with me. Now I can really understand like how our CTO is thinking. It aligns just with exactly with what Jeff was sharing during the fireside chat that he did last week with Workbench. So I totally agree with Brianna, texting and just sharing information, getting to know them and making these like little deposits to them, and not always going to them wanting an update on where the deal is.
And also, thank you for giving a shout out to our event. We always love when people do that.
It was an awesome event.
And also, Sheila, one thing I know you mentioned during another sales session we had earlier with FireHydrant is that during some of your initial outbound, you don't right off the bat ask people for, just watch my demo. You ask for whiteboarding sessions. I was wondering if you could just kind of explain that and the strategy there.
Yeah. So when I mention like whiteboarding sessions, it's more of like a learning, like asking to learn about their business, asking to learn about their current processes. In the case of FireHydrant, like how they're running their incidences today, and not necessarily saying we have this amazing solution that's going to help you, but rather going in there and saying, hey, I want to come and kind of whiteboard what your process looks like today and see if we can actually help you, rather than assuming off the bat that, we've got this amazing solution. It's really helped me in my career and getting meetings. And it also helps with building that relationship and building some rapport with them so that you're not coming across like a used carsman, like you're really going in there to understand their business and their challenges. And then in my outreach to them to get that initial meeting, like I do quite a bit of homework. And I go in there with like my hypothesis for pain and my hypothesis about their business. And I kind of do that based off of blogs, or a lot of these folks, especially the executives, like they speak publicly. So you can really learn a lot about things that they've got going on.
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of sales reps, like professional stalker should probably be like somewhere on your resume or your LinkedIn or something like that. So it's definitely a skill you have to kind of have and love. Cool. But I think for, our next section, it's kind of a catch-all of just, best advice you guys have, which obviously you've been sharing your advice throughout this whole thing. But I'd love for each of you just to go through and share, what's the number one thing you wish someone had told you before you got into technical sales? So the thing you wish you knew the most. I think Brianna, how about you?
Yeah, sure. I think the thing that I wish that someone had told me earlier was just to not be afraid to step outside my comfort zone. It's really easy to get really comfortable doing the same sort of repeatable process, and having a repeatable process is very important. But not being afraid to challenge the people you're working with, and really ask those hard questions and really push people. I think that you're going to find out what deals are real and what people are actually your champions a lot faster. And I think it's a really hard skill to build, particularly sometimes as a woman in a really male dominated conversation, but I think it's important to do.
Yeah. How about you, Kelsey?
I would say, excuse me, I'm really into kind of using this term, being dangerous enough when it comes to, being technical and being able to hold your own conversation, especially in roles like all of us are in. I think it's a pretty powerful objective, right? When you can keep the conversation high level and not just have to, hi, I'm Kelsey, here's my my SC, let him or her take it over. I think being able to kind of focus on finding pain, on business outcomes, understanding, what's working well, what's not, et cetera, I think is a powerful tool. I think kind of around those same lines though, I think something that's very critical is that relationship and partnership that you have with your sales engineer, being on the same page, making sure that you're preparing, et cetera. I think that that's probably the most important partnership within this role, probably more important than you and your manager, right, is the sales engineer, because when things get super technical, obviously you need that person and you need them to articulate value in a way that you're proud of, right? So those are a few things. The only other thing I would add is, every technical sale is a very crowded market. It's very rare that you're the only player in the game. And so I think that each of us have to find creative ways to get in front of customers, really have like that motor every single day to like keep going. And really with that, not getting too high, not getting too low, but trying to stay even keeled and have good perspective, as far as, the progress that you're making on a daily basis.
Yeah, I love that. And another woman at our last sales panel shared something similar about like always try to keep an even keel, because sales is like such a roller coaster and it can be such a high one day and such a low the next day. So totally agree with you there. And how about you, Sheila? One thing that you wish you knew before getting into technical sales?
Knowing it's okay not to know the answer and asking for help. I think I echo, I think Brianna just said this, that as women, like we're sometimes afraid to ask for help or say we don't know, and finding ways to say I don't know without saying I don't know. So like when I'm in a meeting with a customer, rather than saying I don't know, I say that's such a great question, let me get back to you. And then asking for help. If I'm going into a meeting where it's me, my SC, and maybe like 8 or 9 people from the customer side, asking my manager to join me, and that not being me coming from a place of weakness, but we're all on the same team and we all want to excel, and we're all, my manager gets paid if I get paid. So not being afraid to kind of ask for that.
Yeah. Also, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, not even, in technical sales, just kind of in life. So totally understand, asking for help, asking for, specific help in areas you might not be as specifically, keen on and that kind of thing. Which kind of leads into my next question, which would be, if you had like one piece of advice to give to someone looking to get into technical sales, what would it be?
I think it's just not to be intimidated and not to be scared by the process, and not to be scared that it's technical sales versus non-technical sales. Most organizations, like we've talked about, have that enablement aspect of it. And if not, if like you're a smaller company like FireHydrant, like you have your product and your engineering teams to go to and ask for help and to understand kind of what the product does. So I think just not to be afraid. At the end of the day, like sales is sales, and as long as you're asking the right questions to understand the pain and the challenges that your prospects have, and being able to kind of build relationships. And in technical sales, a lot of organizations follow what's called the medic sales process. And the C in there is the champion, and which is kind of what we've been talking about in terms of like building authentic relationships. So I think it's really no different. I think just don't be afraid. Everyone's on the same team, and there's tons of resources out there to help.
How about Brianna or Kelly? Anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. I feel like just don't be afraid to jump in. I think you might not think that you're technical or that you're smart enough or that you're going to be able to get through it. But to Kelsey's point of being dangerous enough, like you don't need to be a full-blown engineer to do this. You just need to be able to be willing to put the work in, and you'll have plenty of technical resources 9 times out of 10 to lean on and to help you and to work together with. So I think that if you don't think you can do it, you definitely can. So just, give it a go. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
And like one thing just to add, if it's okay, you also don't want to be super technical. Like you want your SE or your SAs to be the folks that are forming those relationships on the technical level, and building that relationship and building that rapport and building that credibility. I 100% agree. You want to be kind of dangerous enough, but you want to be viewed as the person going in there to kind of solve their business problems, and your technical counterparts going in there to get into the weeds and kind of solve their technical problems. So just another little thing to add in there.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much it for all of my questions, but I see some Q&A rolling in. And for anyone else on the call who has a question, please put it in the chat and we will definitely get to it. But I think for the first question I'll ask is, the pandemic has changed everything in everyone's life. So, what has been the most difficult part about selling during the pandemic? Any tips or tricks for helping customers see the value even when they have more limited budgets?
So in terms of it being more difficult, 100% it's become a bit more difficult. I think a lot of relationship building and selling happens after the meeting, when you're getting walked out of the conference room, or you're getting walked into the conference room, or you're kind of going out for lunch or drinks with prospects. What I've tried to do is set up more one-on-one conversations. I had one yesterday where the meeting was supposed to be 40 minutes. They're in the insurance, like the mortgage space, this prospect. And we spent the first 20 minutes just chit-chatting about, I'm buying a house. So we just started talking about the mortgage process, and one, it helped build that relationship, and it kind of puts their guard down and helps them kind of open up. And then we spent the last 20 minutes, addressing kind of where we are with our POV. But I think setting up a lot of like one-on-ones and having one-off conversations helps a lot. This coming Monday, I'm meeting with another one of my prospects. It's his day off, and he's meeting with me for a cup of like a virtual coffee to talk about the progress that we're making on the POV. So I find these like one-on-one meetings to be super helpful. And then in terms of budget, I think if you're able to align your solution to an initiative that they're like a business initiative that they're having, which goes back to kind of what problems we're solving for, like what business problems we're solving for. If you can tie yourself to these large corporate initiatives that they're having, the budget exists. You just have to find out what those projects are.
Yeah, and wondering, I have not figured this out myself, but has anyone, kind of solved the Zoom fatigue issue? Like, is there a new way you guys are reaching out to people where it might not be, via Zoom or a phone call to kind of get people engaged in a non-traditional yet safe way during the time?
I would just add that something that I think that we do well in our motion here at Datadog is when a customer engages with us in a proof of concept or a proof of value, we actually open up a joint Slack channel with them. And it's fantastic, right? Because everyone's on Slack. I know I'm on Slack like every moment of every day, and I think our customers are doing the same. So to have the ability to, instead of asking them to jump on a Zoom, just chat them something or send them a link or a blog post, whatever it is, I think has been critical to kind of mix it up. That actually was something that we were doing pre-COVID. And then the other thing that I would just add is Datadog's done a great job of hosting kind of these virtual events, whether it's whiskey tasting or we're doing a beer tasting in a couple weeks. But customers love stuff like that, right? I think everyone's kind of craving that non-work Zoom that's boring, and I think trying to be creative is critical. And then I still think people are willing to somewhat get out of the office if they're comfortable. So I still think that will come back, but obviously maybe not for everyone right away.
Yeah, thanks for sharing these. These are super tactical insights. Brianna, do you have anything else to add?
I've just been encouraging people to turn their video off, especially if it's not the first time I'm speaking with them. Like, I'll turn mine off and I'll be like, hey, I've just had kind of a long Zoom day. Like, everyone can turn theirs off. I think it's just like being a little bit human. Also, to that piece of asking harder questions. Like, if I'm not in a first call or we're deeper in negotiation and I want to kind of dig in, I'm like, oh, turn your video off. Let's all just kind of relax. But it does make it easier to, dig in and seem a little bit less pushy if they can't really see your face. So it's twofold. But no, I agree with everything Kelsey and Sheila were saying too.
Yeah, and I think with that, unless any of our panelists have anything else, left to say, now would be the time. Or if they're, unless anyone wants to talk about the NDA process with clients.
I would just add, about an NDA process. I have some customers that won't say anything unless they have an NDA. So I think trying to get that, out of the way is as early as possible. And then I think getting a commitment, hey, if we go get this signed, are you gonna, open up Pandora's box, right? Kind of making sure that they're willing to truly share after getting that in place. But yeah, that's a good question. I think depending on what vertical you're in, what you're selling, what type of data your platform is collecting, I certainly think that that's something that still is required for certain customers.
Yeah, and I think here's a good question from Sarah. Do you have any strategies for effective customer discovery, tools or frameworks that you use?
I can share there. I'm just pretty upfront about it. I'm like, prior to any initial qualification or demo call, I'm going to send questions and hope they answer them. But if they don't, on initial calls, I'm just kind of doing gives and gets. So, hey, I'm going to need you to tell me a little bit about your tech stack. I need to know these 4 things. Then I'll be able to tell you more about what we do, or then I'll be able to, share a little bit of our UI with you, but I just want to make sure this aligns so we don't have to waste either of our time. I think framing it up that way is pretty helpful.
Yeah, and to add to what Brianna said, I also add, I want to make sure that we're demoing and we're showing you things that are really relevant for you. So understanding this upfront can really help my SE kind of tailor the demo or customize the demo to your specific needs. Our product does so many things. I want to make sure we're using your time effectively.
That's good. And these are great questions. And I know we have a few other questions, but we're going to head into breakout room.